Krista, I'm Drew.
Nice to meet you.
I'm Zach.
Hey Zach, I'm Drew.
We are here for a walking tour.
Great. Well, you've come to the right place. This is the Louisville Visitor Center, and we do the whiskey walking tours out of here. And what we're going to do is talk about the history of the bourbon distilling industry here in Kentucky, and also we're going to talk about the history of the whiskey industry and its impact on Louisville. And we're going to go tour some older historic places in Louisville known as Whiskey Row. And I'll give you a little history about that when we go down there. Well, here we are on Main Street. We're actually at the corner of 6th and Main, and we're standing out in front of the Devin Williams Bourbon Experience. Now, Devin Williams, if you see on the bottle inside there, it says 1783. And the reason why that date is so important is that he was one of the first licensed distillers, not only in Kentucky, but right here in Louisville. And his still was located right down the street here between 5th and 6th Street on River Road. So it has a lot of history here. Devin Williams is owned by the Heaven Hill Distillery, and they opened up this tour here several years ago as part of the renaissance and the revival that's going on in the bourbon industry right now. Here we are in the final part of the whiskey tour, and behind me is a portrait of George Garvin Brown. And he was the developer of Old Forester whiskey. And what was so neat about him is that he worked for a pharmaceutical firm. And he came up with the concept of putting bourbon whiskey in a bottle. Because back then, in 1870, whiskey was sold out of the barrel. And it was never consistent in the quality or the quantity of what you were getting as far as whiskey. So he came up with the idea of putting bourbon whiskey in the bottle and then selling that, and he shaped the bottle in the size of a pharmaceutical bottle. And the label on the bottle was also written out like a prescription. And he named it Old Forester after a very well-known Civil War doctor. And he thought since this doctor's name was so well known that people would trust this product as a way of treating their ailments or illnesses. And that is why his portrait sits up here. And also his distillery was located down here too in Whiskey Row. Now back then, a lot of the distillers located their businesses here in Whiskey Row, and they were more for accounting purposes, because as the riverboats came up and down the river, they would roll the whiskey barrels out onto the street, down Main Street, and roll them down towards the river, where they would either go north or south to be delivered. They wanted to make sure that none of the product did not miss the boat, so to speak. So what they did is they moved their accounting offices down here in Whiskey Row to make sure that if they sent down 100 barrels of bourbon whiskey, that 100 barrels of bourbon whiskey was being accounted for. As you can see, the buildings behind me, they started in the era about 1850 to about 1910, when this area was completed. And it was basically, a majority of them was because of the distilling industry here in Louisville. Now today, we are very fortunate that the Brown-Forman Corporation has purchased these buildings from the descendants of the Brown family, of George Garvin Brown's family. And now they are going to move Old Forester whiskey production down here and make it part of the Bourbon Trail experience here in Louisville. So we're very fortunate. They're going to be investing close to $30 million in revitalizing this area of Whiskey Row.